Hey everyone, it's Terry with Terry's Tidbits and the Des Moines, Iowa User Group. Our February meeting for 2024 has a special guest. Mary Tagler is joining us, and we did kind of a tag team interview-like session on the Service Cloud. She has a fantastically large Service Cloud implementation in Chicago. She was incredibly gracious to allow me to tap her on the shoulder with very little notice. I think I maybe gave her a week, and which was terribly unfair. So thank you, Mary, for that. But we had a good time. We got to know each other during this session and learn a little bit about how she manages a larger Service Cloud implementation. Take a look. Hey everyone, it's Terry with Terry's Tidbits. I am so glad you're here. Well, welcome everyone to the Des Moines User Group. This is our Lunch and Learn session, and this is a direct result of some of the communication that we had back in, I think it was in January, from our meeting where we asked you specifically what types of topics you were interested in, and Service Cloud was high on your list of topics. So when I was thinking about people who potentially could help us on the Service Cloud side, one of the names that came to my mind right away was Mary Tagler, who I know runs a sizable org in the Chicago area. And we're going to learn a little bit more about that, I think, as she speaks. Mary's also somebody who I've wanted to have present for us and talk to us for a long time. She's I'm kind of skipping ahead to her introduction and skipping the announcements, so I'll come back to the announcements a little bit. But Mary is one that I've as long as I've been in the Salesforce community, she's one that I've kind of always kind of looked up to and admired. And we really have never had any real conversations with each other per se, but I know we've sat on some credentialing meetings together, and we certainly run into each other. She's a fellow MVP and actually Hall of Fame MVP. She's been at this for quite a while. Also a Golden Hoodie recipient, so you'll be able to ask her some questions. Actually, I have a question about that that we're going to talk about. But you're going to find Mary to be incredibly smart. Is going to know the product well. So this particular meeting, it's going to be really an interview-like style where I'm going to just kind of hit her with a bunch of questions, and we're going to see where this conversation goes. You are more than welcome to chime in with questions. You don't need to raise your hand, just simply come off mute. This can be very informal, and feel free to ask questions that you may have as we go through this. So let me jump back to announcements real quick if I can find what I did with those with my slide. I am also slightly unprepared here. I'm not even going to bring up the slides. I'm just going to talk about them. That's our upcoming events. I'll post these in the chat, or maybe Clarissa, if you can post the upcoming meetings in the chat. What I want to make sure is that you get a chance to see the dates that we have all of our events scheduled for this coming year. We are working on getting speakers connected for all of these, but the one that I want to mention most is the March 25th meeting. That's going to be another lunch and learn similar to this, and Eric Smith will be speaking to us on that. If you're not familiar with Eric Smith's name, he is the guy that does a lot of the work off of Unofficial SF for Flow. And so if you want to see some really, really cool stuff that you can do with Flow, he's the guy that you're going to want to get to know. And so he'll be here March 20, not here, but he'll be here virtually on March 21st. So get that one added to your calendar. And then from a community standpoint, other events that are happening, May 30th is Texas Dreaming. That's the next Dreaming event. The big one that we always promote is Midwest Dreaming, which is on the 17th of July. So you may want to put that on your calendar if you don't have it there. Witness Success is going to be in August, and that's going to be in Louisville, Kentucky this coming year. So if that's one that you're interested in. And then with Salesforce events, we have Trailhead DX, which is next week. Mary, are you going to be there?
I will.
I will be there as well. Anybody else going to Trailhead DX next week?
There's also going to be DevOps streaming put on by GearSet in May.
Oh, nice. Where's
Yes.
that? Is that virtual or where's that one
It's
located?
in Chicago. There might be a virtual option. Let me quickly look it up. They sent us
Okay.
the email, and what we laughed about was the email itself doesn't say the date. We had to click into it. So I
Nice.
kept reading. It's like
Nice.
save the date. I'm like, yeah, right,
What
date.
date? Oh,
May
nice.
20th and 21st. I'm not sure if there's virtual option or not, but there's definitely in person.
And that's
I went last year. It was good.
and that's in Chicago.
It is.
So that's going to be right before Connections, also in Chicago. Then it
Yeah.
sounds like so they're piggybacking off of those together. Nice, awesome. Matt, you have your hand up. What can we do for you?
I was just responding to who's going to TDX.
Ah, sweet, good. I'll see you there then. Nice. Then maybe I just catch up with you there instead of calling. All right. I think that is all I have then for announcements. We'll get these things posted so that you have the dates out there so you get them on your calendar. So with that, I'm going to start our conversation off with Mary. I've already done a little bit of an introduction about Mary. And so let me just kind of start off, Mary, by asking you to share a little bit about your Salesforce journey with the group. How did you get into the ecosystem? What was that like?
Sure. So my background is I'm a certified financial planner. It becomes relevant. And while working at my company, I left. I went to law school for a while. I left law school and I came back in a very different capacity. And when I came back, I was not working with clients directly, but I was working on practice issues. And the practice I worked for was really scaling their business. And we had a CRM. Some of you may have heard of it. Many of you probably haven't, called Goldmine. Goldmine had a user guide that was about 40 pages long. So that was the extent of what you could do with Goldmine. Yeah. It didn't honor things like time zones. It didn't connect to your calendar. And we had just opened our second office in Denver, which is in a different time zone. And we were starting to really feel the pain of trying to use this old system. It was installed on our servers. It would crash all the time. And so one of the things I proposed was, as I started looking at fintech tooling, I proposed that we consider replacing our CRM. And I looked at a few options, some which were in the fintech space exclusively, like your Redtails. And then I looked at Salesforce, and I'm very much a gut feeling person. So it's like, I feel like this is the choice. The company was interested, so we interviewed all our options. We really did like what Salesforce had to offer. And then we naively were like, well, we just buy it like all our other tools. We hire the consultant, they set it up, and like we're done. And that's not really how it works because, right, you have someone, can we have a field? Can you change a pick list? Can you do this? And we started to realize that it really was a living, breathing piece of software. And the first year to year and a half, it was like 25 to 50% of my job. Like I got things done, worked with consultants if we had an active agreement with them as I could, but really didn't treat it as like, this is an actual role. And as we started to approach that 2-year mark, that balance got more to 100% of my time is doing this. And my manager at the time, I was like, this is what I really like to do. I want this to be my official role because my title did not reflect my role. And he said no. And I thought about it and I thought to myself, I'm like, well, I've been doing this for a year, almost a whole year, 100% of my time, and no one's even noticed. I'm just going to keep doing it. I don't necessarily advise that as an employment strategy. If you've been with a company for a long time, you have a little more leeway, but I basically just made it my job. And at that point, I really got more invested in the community. I started to think about certification, and I started to think about like, if I'm going to treat this as my job, kind of like an athlete has to perfect their skill, like I really need to make sure I have the skill set so that I'm worth what they're paying me.
I like that. That concept. I've never thought of it from that perspective. The idea of all of the involvement and getting engaged in the community is kind of it's almost like exercising. It's a way of perfecting what we do is in our career, that's an interesting concept.
And when you come from a different space, a non-technical space, everything is new. You make a lot of mistakes. I did not work in a sandbox initially. I knew they existed, right. But like you make some really hard mistakes and then you start figuring it out. And a couple of years later, you look back in horror at some of the early stuff you built.
Yeah, I remember the first system I wrote. It was actually for a gym that is located here in the Des Moines area, and I would hate to go back and see that. I hope they're not using it anymore.
It's like you want to change the name of the admin on your way out. Like,
Yeah,
this wasn't Terry.
yeah.
This was someone totally different.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm not going to tell anybody who that gym was either, in case you all know it, because you will know the name here locally anyway. But yeah, that's an embarrassment, for sure. Great. So you ended up then moving to a company called Relatively. Is that, am I saying that right?
Relativity.
Relativity. Okay.
Yep.
Terrible with pronunciation.
That's okay.
If your name wasn't as easy as Mary, I'm sure I would get it wrong too. So, but yeah. So, what made the change then? Was it because you wanted the opportunity to stay focused on Salesforce?
So I had the opportunity to be focused on Salesforce for a few years at my company, and I really went through sort of a journey of figuring out what came next for my career. So as I got more invested in the community, I improved my skill set. If anyone here works in financial services, particularly in smaller companies, you see that they're late adopters. They're not early adopters. So I felt the speed at which I wanted to move and improve things was not the speed at which the business wanted to move. And so the first issue was I needed help. Like when I started to outline all the work I was doing, I felt like there was a lot of strategic work that could be done, but there was a lot of keeping the lights off work too. And I was spending tons of my time doing keeping the lights on work. I was also part of a 2-person IT team. So I was crawling under desks and setting up phones and managing
Oh,
SSO
wow.
and doing a whole bunch of other stuff
Okay.
that, I didn't necessarily originally have the skill set for. And so I was originally told they were choosing not to hire a second admin. It wasn't a budget issue. The
Oh,
leader just didn't believe we needed it. And at that point, I got really angry and frustrated. And, my manager agreed, like, we need this support if we really want to like take our experience to the next level. And once I got past the anger, I started thinking about, well, if I had this second person, like what kind of things would I focus on? What kind of things would I want to do? And when I started to think about that, I'm like, even if I have this second person, they're not ready to move at the pace I want to move at with my career. And then I really shifted from a place of being mad to a place of being like, I need to leave. That's the
okay.
best thing for both of us because our interests are not aligned.
Yeah.
And at this, my last company, they teased me because both times I basically gave them a year and said, I will be leaving in a year. So when I was ready to leave for law school, I said, I know I have a key role. I'm going to wind it down, but I'm leaving in a year to go to law school. When I left, my husband was at a company that offered a sabbatical. And as I started to think about the logistics, I'm like, well, I'd like to go with him. And if I take a new role, I can't go. And I have some of these certification goals and learning goals. And if I leave now, I'll be learning a whole new job and I can't accomplish them. So I basically invested in myself for a year.
Nice.
I got certifications I wanted to get. Became a certified product owner with Scrum. I took a project management course on Coursera, and I really tried to build not just the Salesforce skills, but the surrounding skills that I thought were important to take my career to the next level. And I had told my manager, I said, my husband's sabbatical is on this day. This will be my last day. And then I started looking. And
All
through the community, I actually found my role. So Relativity is a local company in Chicago. Occasionally, they would host user groups and things. So I had been there. I didn't know any of the team there, but fellow MVP and friend Joy had worked at another local Chicago company, and a lot of those folks had moved around, and a lot of them had ended up at Relativity. Her and my previous manager were good friends, and she happened to mention, she's like, there's an opening, it's for a junior admin, I don't know if you're interested, but you should have lunch with this person. And I did. Told her about what I didn't like about my role, asked her about her role, not realizing she would actually be my manager. So I was very candid. And when I said, so what's this manager like, are they good people? She's like, well, it's actually me. So
Oh,
I've throughout my career, I've had a track record of asking awkward questions, but they happen to work out for me. And um, when I said, this role is a junior role, I think my skill set's above what you're looking for. I'm really interested, but I don't think this sounds like the right fit. And she came back with, for the right candidate, I can go to bat and see if we can get this to be the right level of position. And she did. And I interviewed, and the team I interviewed with really liked me. And I went from being a solo admin to working with a team that had developers, had an architect, had scrum masters. So it was a huge shift.
interesting. I, I like the fact that you had the confidence to realize that, hey, I'm better than what this position is, or it's not really the right fit. You didn't say it that way, but
Right.
to
But it was
recognize your
also
value.
yeah, and it was also important for me to leave my company at least as good as I found it.
Hmm.
So
Yeah,
I pushed for, I was like, you could hire someone when I leave, but I think if we can do this right, you're going to hire someone at least 3 months before I leave so I can train them.
sure.
And what's interesting is, like, I hired that person, and she has since moved on, and we're still really good friends. And so that was really nice, like being able to find someone, develop a dialogue, and like help her, because we've all walked into situations where we inherit an org and the person's long gone and it's a hot mess.
Yeah.
And at least I could walk her through some of the weird business reasons we do things. It was also really refreshing seeing someone come in who didn't know the business challenge our stakeholders in a much different
Oh,
way
yeah.
than I would have, because I had worked there for so long. I was like, oh, you say
Sure.
this, but like, you didn't think about this thing. She's like, you said this. This is all I'm
Yeah.
thinking about, unless you tell me all of the other factors you need to consider.
Nice. So tell us a little bit about what relativity. I'm not going to get that right. Your current company. Tell
Yeah.
us a little bit
So
about what they do, and then how big are they? That
sure.
sort of thing. Customer base. That.
So, if you've ever worked with lawyers or been sued or sued someone, you might have a general idea of what we do. So, we are a company in the legal technology space, and we do what's called e-discovery. So, prior to the days of computers, discovery was really a physical process, and it's probably easier to analogize kind of what we do that way. So, if you sue someone else, like if I sue Terry, basically they issue an item called a legal hold, and it means you have to preserve all documents and records related to the reason I'm suing Terry. And then you have to provide all those documents, and you usually have a team of people, sometimes law students, sometimes contractors, sometimes full employees, that read through all the documentation and determine if it is relevant or not, discoverable or not, privileged or not. And then that's all the information that's used in the litigation process. And the e-discovery process has a bunch of steps. It's formalized by something called EDRM. If you Google it, you'll see charts that lay out all the different steps in EDRM. So what relativity does is, in a digital world, most of those documents are not physical pieces of paper. They are either scanned documents, they're emails, they're Excel files, they're all different types of file formats. So we take all of that data, and we have products that move through the EDRM process. And so we have tooling that can help you search large volumes of data. So maybe you need to look for all documents where it says the word Enron within like 3 words from the word money. Like, you can do things like that, create
Oh, interesting.
visualizations. We also have one of the coolest features I saw when I onboarded is we have this email threading feature. So you can load up all the Outlook records into our system, and it'll basically create almost like an org chart, and it'll show you the tree of emails, and it'll show you where emails are missing, so that you can go back and be like, okay, well, we're missing this email in this chain. Please provide it for our discovery.
Okay. Cool.
And
And that's.
so, oh, go ahead.
No, I was going to say. I'm assuming that's not built on Salesforce. That's like proprietary
It's not
system.
built on Salesforce.
It's
It's built on Azure.
okay.
And so we're the market leader in our space.
Yeah.
Our customer base is partner resellers, is large companies, large law firms, and government entities, both domestic and abroad, state and federal.
Okay. Interesting. All right, so
Yeah.
let's talk then a little bit about Service Cloud and how you use
Sure,
that.
sure. So our org is from 2006, so it's really old. We use several clouds. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on them, but I'll kind of tell you what we've got. We've got
Yeah.
sales, we've got CPQ, we've got service, and we've got Experience Cloud. And then we integrate with Marketo as marketing automation. With Service Cloud, it's kind of hard not to talk about service and experience at the same time.
Yeah.
Our company, I've actually lost track of how many employees we have. I think we're in like the 12 to 1500 range. But our customer community, we actually have two. We have a partner community, which is in the process of actually moving off of Salesforce's PRM to in partner. And that's about 500 people, but they're looking to grow it. And then we have our end customer community, which is about 19,000 customers that integrates obviously with Salesforce and is built on Salesforce Experience Cloud.
Wow.
So
It's a little
that
big.
what
19,000. That's kind of sizable.
it is. And so we have a lot of our community covers a lot of ground. So our community covers, the sales pieces. So we have things like user groups. We have an entire training and certification platform. Think of it as a much, much smaller version of what Salesforce offers in terms of training and certification. But we leverage our customer community as a way to register for certifications, view your certifications, download any of the electronic like digital files related to cert badges and things like that. All of that kind of stuff. And then we have, and you'll hear me refer to cases as tickets a lot. I try to break the habit when I talk to Salesforce folks, but when you work in the legal space, case has a very specific use
right.
case.
Yes, it would.
Right. So we refer to them as tickets.
Okay.
But customers can view their cases, whether they're submitting, something to training and certification or support. But our support group has a really big piece of the community and actually owns the overall community. And that's where that facilitates our community or web digital channel for case submission.
Okay.
And so on the Service Cloud side, we originally, because we're an org from 2006, I suspect our original team was, I know our original team was a set of like engineers and whatnot. There was really no formalized dedicated team. And then we had a rotating cycle of consultants. So the result is we have about 50 plus record types on case. We are in the process of deprecating because we've deactivated a lot. And there are things, basically, I felt like someone didn't realize there's a pick list feature because they were so hyper specific. Like, oh, you have a Microsoft question? We have a Microsoft record type. You have an Excel question? I kid you not, we have an Excel record type.
No.
So we
Okay.
got it down to at least business areas where they have defined business processes. And that's about 15 to 20. I'd say it's somewhere between the 15 to 20 area in like actively used record types. We, in the past few years, have moved some folks off of Service Cloud. So if you have internal only type support needs and it doesn't rely on Salesforce data, we've moved them to Jira, mainly for licensing.
Sure.
We have enterprise-wide licensing for Jira. So from a cost perspective, it's cheaper. The larger your org gets, you really have to care about how you're spending your money.
Is Jira integrated then with Salesforce or no?
It is.
Okay.
Yeah. So we have Jira Service Management, which is kind of like Jira's community portion. So internal folks will use that for their ticket submission. But we have for some of our teams that work across both systems, we have an integration with Jira. We personally use GoToGroup. And so it's used a lot. We have sort of two experiences. One is what I call the light experience, where if you switch a status, it just pushes the ticket into Jira, and then it closes your Salesforce case. We have the heavy experience, which we use for our customer support team. So our customer support team does about 45,000 cases per year. And basically, if they need to engage engineering, they can escalate to the right team. So we have a modal that we've built out that allows them to choose where they want to escalate it. It will push the ticket. It'll create a ticket in Jira. It'll also sync back details. And one of the things we're looking at longer term is we're trying to move more engineers out of Salesforce. The biggest reason they're in there is they need attachments and emails to
Oh,
really
sure.
understand what the customer has submitted. And
Yeah.
through Go to Group, there's actually a feature we're not using that allows them from the Jira ticket to view that like on demand. So that'll be an area because we have our engineering group is the largest department. I think it's about 800 people, and we have about 300 of them in Salesforce, which is very expensive.
Yeah. Yeah. Group, any questions that you have specifically for Mary, feel free to unmute and ask at any point.
Oh, I should
Or
also add, I'm a people leader. So, that is
yes,
also on the table if you have any questions about that.
yeah, and we're going to talk a little bit about that too here before we're done. But you're also welcome to throw something in the chat if something comes up. I'm really fascinated by the 50 record types. I want to know
Yes.
is there also like 50-page layouts for all of those?
Uh, there used to be, actually, there used to be more than that because you
Oh
have,
my goodness.
if you're smart, you have community facing layouts. So you have customer
Oh,
layouts
right,
versus,
right.
right. So in some cases, we have two different layouts. But one of the efforts I took on when I joined, and my husband would joke because I really love a clean digital house. I am not so much in my actual house because quite that diligent. Um, but I really had an interest in like, how do we just clean up the junk that we don't need in this org?
I was
And
going to.
so it evolved into a platform health effort. So I run a meeting every 2 weeks with everyone on our team. We create stories to get rid of that functionality that's not working. And we have developed written processes around like the steps we need to take to make sure we're not disrupting the functionality in our org, but we're also not creating downstream impact. So one of the other big integrations we have that we didn't talk about is we currently use Tableau Desktop, and we leverage Informatica to push a lot of that information to Tableau and into our SQL server so it can be used in other places. And so whenever we pull a field or an object, we have to understand like, is that used not only in front facing dashboards in Tableau, but in any type of backend logic as well. And so we've developed a process with them where like they give us like, okay, we're good. We've removed the dependencies. Like you're good to just delete it.
To go ahead and get rid of it. Good, good. Yeah, I would guess that there's a variety of technical debt in a system of that age.
Yes.
So getting good at cleaning house, digitally cleaning, that's an interesting way to think about it. That's great.
Yeah.
Pearl asked a question in the chat. Can you talk of any at all about Einstein for Service Cloud?
Not as much as you would probably like me to. One of the efforts that our group is undergoing is really trying to do some transformational work for our Service Cloud group this year. That's one of the things we've talked about is leveraging Einstein for Service Cloud. In the past, we've done some Einstein experience before I joined the team. And I think from the feedback I've heard, we needed to be really patient about building up that data to get really intelligent recommendations. Now that's pre a lot of the Copilot features rolling out with AI. So I would expect that that would change the game a bit, but I don't have any firsthand experience I can talk to working with Einstein for Service Cloud, but the demos I've seen have been pretty cool.
Anyone on the call use Einstein for Service Cloud? Have any experience that could help Pearl with?
This is Tracy from General Mills. We do
Yeah,
some.
Tracy.
It depends on in what way you want to use it, and what part, because with Salesforce, their marketing, they put Einstein on a lot of different things. So I don't know if you're thinking of like the next best action part, or Einstein is tagged on a bunch of different things. So if there's a specific part of it that you're thinking about, that might help me with your question some.
And feel free, Pearl, to chat with Tracy on that if you have more questions on it. Mary, you talked there a little bit about some of the transformation things that you're looking to do within your org. Can you expand on some of that? What are some
Sure.
of those items?
So the first thing I call is building our foundation. We are not on omnichannel. We had Salesforce before omnichannel existed. And so one of our goals this year is to move out of all the manual stuff we've built to do skills-based routing and to do some of the routing into omnichannel. So that's the first transformational project, Service Cloud related. The next one is implementing Service Cloud Voice. And there's the voice part and the telephony part. And so we need to do both. We are most likely going to go with Vonage for the telephony part, replacing our existing call center system, Nice and Contact. And we'll also, because Nice and Contact's more of a platform rather than modularized, we will also be looking for a replacement workforce management solution. And so we've been working with our service delivery operations team on ensuring our team fully understands the technical aspects and capabilities and functions from a Salesforce perspective and an end user perspective. And then our counterparts who specialize in support, leadership, and in workforce management will have their perspective on does it check all the boxes that they need as we work to implement. And we will be working with an implementation partner, particularly for the service stuff to make sure we get, or the voice stuff to make sure we get it right.
And you use sandboxes today?
We do. So we follow DevOps processes. When I eventually started using sandboxes, I had no strategy. I would literally spin up sandboxes and work on things in different sandboxes.
Yeah.
But here we work, we follow an agile methodology. So we work in 2-week sprints. Every member of the team has a dedicated personal sandbox that they work in and promote up. So the first step is their personal sandbox. Then it goes to what we call our CI sandbox, which is really just the first gate to make sure everything is deployable. Then it'll go into UAT where we'll ask our end users to test. Then we'll again push it to another gating sandbox we call staging before it goes to production. We expect peer review. We have basically we try and follow an ITIL format for change management as best as we can. So we categorize our changes by standard or normal. So a standard change is typically a documented change that is repeatable, that is low risk. And a normal change will be something that might be an ad hoc process. It might be something that there is a larger degree of risk involved. Whatever it is, if it doesn't have a standard change entry tied to it, it is normal. And that's important because it impacts how they get approved and when we release. So we have what we call a change advisory board, which I sit on. We can't approve our own changes, but we could approve others. And our change advisory board approves regular changes, regular normal changes, and then some of us approve emergency and expedited changes. So a normal change will get reviewed at a CAB meeting, and it's an opportunity for people to ask questions and make sure they understand what the change is, why we're doing it, the impact. And we typically try and release those in off-peak business hours. It's a little bit harder with an international firm because everything's kind of peak business hours, but we usually either release while we're still sleeping, which is midday Poland time, or we release dinner time in the US, which tend to be our lower volume numbers. So if we're disrupting people, we're disrupting the smallest population we can. And then expedited is anything that comes in that's not an emergency, but is going to come in off cycle. So maybe something needs to be changed quickly. It wasn't planned for. And then emergency is like the best example I can give is a case ticket loop where you just are creating hundreds and hundreds of tickets and someone needs to go in and kill the loop and restore order. That's an example of an emergency change, or a P1, an emergency change might be to get you to de-escalate that incident so that you're not completely disrupting workflow, because we treat a P1 as a total or near catastrophic work stoppage.
Okay. I'm curious, in an org that size and moving items into production, how long is that cycle?
So it really depends. So some people have their system set up so it just auto deploys changes that have been approved. For us, we release almost every day of the week. We release standards 3 days a week, although you could always slot them into a normal day if you choose. And normals, the most frequently we release on Thursdays, but sometimes we have an optional Tuesday. So if someone has work, it really comes down to how quickly you can get it built and tested and signed off by your stakeholders. And the test and sign offs always seems to be the part where we're pleading with people to get their testing done.
I was thinking too, documentation or communication of these changes would be an interesting challenge in an
So, yes, it can be. It depends on where it is. So, like anything standard already has a documented procedure to get it done, but any change that gets released by a release manager has to have a change management record attached to it. So, at some level, it's going to pull in the inventory of what pieces of metadata you're changing. We've had to get better and better because our normal changes now happen while we're sleeping. And so, if there are manual steps that need to occur, we need to make sure that we've written them all out so someone on our polling team can actually execute on them. And so that's actually made us better about really listing out the changes that need to occur. But documentation, I think for every org is always a constant struggle.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would agree. I want to kind of talk a little bit about the things that are measured within your Service Cloud.
Oh,
What are some of the key metrics that you look for?
So so I would say the things I look for versus the things the business look for are always very different.
Oh, I'm sure.
It's really hard working for a data company because our users care about every data point, and they're always inventing new data points. So it can be a little trying sometimes. Like my team is like, how do they look at all of this data? Like there's just so many data points. But for us, selfishly, like probably the biggest thing we look at is flow errors. We look at how successful the work we roll out does. We look at apex and flow errors most frequently. That for me, that's my team's most important metric. Also, failed changes is another important metric. But from the business, they care about things like, the average time to resolve a case. They care about if the case has to be reopened. They care how many cases are getting escalated. And we have a few ways we track escalation. We have the escalations to JIRA. We have escalations that customers can request. Like the example would be, think about if you open a Salesforce support ticket and you're not getting an answer and you're frustrated, that kind of escalation. Like I opened this a week ago and no one has responded to me. And they're also looking at milestones. Like, how many milestone violations do we have? Are we meeting our SLAs?
Gotcha. So it sounds pretty common as far as and the fact that you're in a larger org really doesn't change the things that are typically measured on the Service Cloud.
The things that get harder are less around case metrics, more around some of the other metrics. So, things like, how do I know if my user is an admin? Similar to Salesforce, like you don't just want your average users creating tickets, being like, how do we create a pick list field? Because I need that. They're going to close it, tell you to talk to your internal admin. Yeah. So we have, how do we determine who is an admin? And it becomes complicated with partner selling because we work with large consulting firms that might work with underlying clients. So we want to make sure, like if a partner at a consulting firm says, like, I need this for this customer, that they're actually authorized to do that. We have customers with multiple instances. We have customers with multiple locations. So like the supporting data, not necessarily the case specific metrics, are things that become really complex for us. And for a variety of reasons, one of which was relativity is our name. Our name used to be Kekura because that's our flagship product. And for many years, we were a single product company. And then we started rolling out additional products to complement what we do. And so that really impacted our org across every cloud as to how we reflect, like, which products do our customers have. We have parent and child accounts, being able to roll things up, being able to think about where these contracts need to live, because some customers, the parent contracts all of their instances, some the individual entities contract theirs. So that's really made, like, from an architecture standpoint, the complexity increase almost exponentially.
So now, do you do most of the architectural work within your org? Do you have an architect?
I do a good chunk of it, but we also have a couple architects. So we used to have one. He was actually promoted and is now the VP of all of IT. So he focuses not only on enterprise architecture, but a lot of things. But it is helpful because he is very familiar with our org. And so he's another ear that can listen and provide guidance. But we have two architects that work on our org. They're more dev focused. And so I tend to come in with my leads when we have to really balance the thinking about things from a dev perspective from thinking about things from an admin perspective.
You mentioned that one of the things that you measure is the effectiveness of your flows and the flow errors. What's your target? This is kind of side question, but more curiosity on my side. What's your target for a number of errors that are acceptable with flow?
So we don't really do a hard target. We could. We have the data for it. And it's honestly like we all get alerted. So, and we tend to all file them in an Outlook rule. And so it's more art than science where we kind of look through and we're like, hey, this, like we just fixed one where a guy on our team's like, this flow sends us like 30 errors a day. This is unacceptable. Yeah. And we put it in the queue and we work to address the defect. So it's more like that. If we see a lot, like there's one where it's a validation rule issue and we should refactor it now that you can handle validation rules in Flow. But it's what's funny about it is it's the same user. It's literally the same person who clicks the wrong series. And so part of us is like, well, we should fix it. And the other part's like, it's one person. So issue. Like not a high priority. Like if it's affecting all of our users, like let's get that fixed.
Interesting. All right. Well, cool. I wanted to ask you to talk to us about one of the features within your org that you're most proud of. And if by chance you're able to show it, that'd be awesome. I don't want to put you on the spot to have to show it, but talk to us a little bit about what.
Okay. I can't show it, but I could tell you where to find it in Automation Hour. I taled about it a couple years ago. Okay. So when I first joined, the first project I was given, I really felt was a test. It was to get our service team onto Lightning. So the reason it felt like a test was what I didn't know when I said yes was that they had tried it twice before and failed. And the stakeholders were annoyed and angry because they really hated the experience they were given. The first thing I looked at was like what went wrong. And the first thing that went wrong was they built the experience they thought the users would want. They didn't really consult with anyone from the support department. And that was done by someone who's no longer on our team. So I was like, okay, well, I'm not going to do that.
All right.
And the second thing I saw was the second round failed because it was all managers giving input, not the actual agents who were using the experience. And they hated the experience. So I was like, okay, well, these are very fixable problems. So being new to the firm helped too, because it was a totally different industry for me. I knew I didn't know a ton. So I did a lot of listening sessions. And what I found hilarious was like most people's hill to die on was having a console app because they needed their tabs and not having a 3-column layout because they hated it.
Okay.
And I was like, I could give you like just that like tomorrow. Like that's super easy. And so what was nice about it is I did all the listening sessions. We created a group that was cross-functional in the sense that they were all from the same department, but we had people of managers, non-managers, newer agents, seasoned agents, and we could really talk through like, some of the things would be like, well, what if we did this? And like seasoned agents would be like, no, and new agents would be like helpful. And so we try and negotiate, meet in the middle and assign that as the feature set.
Okay.
But the one thing I heard from everyone was focus. Like I hate things that take me away from the focus. Like I am on a ticket on this page and I'm in the product usually on the other page. Like if I have to click on something that takes me off the ticket, it's really inconvenient. And the business, we talked about knowledge earlier, really wanted to create more knowledge articles. And I don't know how many of you work with Salesforce Knowledge. It's not my favorite feature. I knew nothing about it going in. And what they were like, well, if I need to find an article and it doesn't exist, I create new article and it creates the article, But then I have to go back to the ticket and search for the article and link it back to the ticket. And I've lost focus, and that's just dumb. I was like, yeah, it sounds dumb. Like, let's fix it.
Yeah.
So I worked through a flow. It was very difficult because if you've ever worked with the knowledge architecture, it is far from straightforward with all the versioning and the different objects. But I worked on a flow that basically allowed them to run the flow. It would pull in data points from the ticket directly into pre-populated fields. So there was less cutting and pasting for them in the first place.
Yeah.
And then it would create the article, automatically link it to the ticket, and not leave the ticket page at all. And that was like that, and another flow I built for them on closing duplicate tickets easier were like the two things that people talked about for months as being huge time savers, which was super exciting.
Nice.
The closed ticket one was a super easy flow for duplicates because they wanted to change statuses and add notes, and we tracked what's called case time in a custom object, and they needed to add case time. So we were able to do that automatically. Like they loved it. And so sometimes some of the littler things have the biggest impact. But for me, like I thought the knowledge thing was pretty cool. And it's still in use today.
Well, the thing that kind of, I like what you said there. Sometimes it's the little things, but the little things you wouldn't have known if you didn't take the time to do those listening sessions. And
yeah, exactly.
Yeah. I would back in my previous days before I got into Salesforce, I would call that management by walking around.
Yeah,
and
it's the hardest skill to teach. As a people leader, I really try and get my team to understand empathy for the user experience. And when you think about it as an admin, you probably use the front end of your org the least of anyone in your company.
Yeah.
And so it's really easy to get away from like, I can build it, but I don't actually use it. So like, I don't think about the experience. And so someone on my team built a new functionality, the functionality I talked about earlier for customers to say, like, I need this escalated. And there were two components. There was the escalation page, and then there was a review by a manager. So a manager could kind of QC it and say, like, why was this escalated? What could we do better next time? And they had created it on 2 tabs, which from a design standpoint seems fine. But when I was testing it, every time I needed to look at the details, I had to click the tab back and go back and forth. And I was like, oh, let just do a 2-column. Like, that'd be so much easier. And she's like, well, why? And I'm like, run through it. Like, if you're a manager and you have to, like, for her, she ran through her test as like, the manager needs to be able to see these fields and the manager needs to be able to set these fields. But what you need to do is sit in the manager's chair metaphorically and say, okay, I'm a manager. I actually care about what was written on the form. So now I'm not only caring that like the fields work, I'm caring like, what do I need to look at the same time? And is it easily available to me? And that's, for me, I find that the hardest skill to teach because it's part soft skill, part technical skill, and really it sometimes is a trade-off in speed versus quality.
Sometimes I think too, it's a matter of being curious enough to even go down that path.
And I do thank the fact that I was customer facing for so many years, because I think it helps me think of, like, even though I worked in a totally different industry, it helps me like sort of channel the inner customer. Like, if I were a customer or if I were the manager, how would I feel about this? Because when you're customer facing, that has to be your entire mindset.
I'm going to pause again to give the group a chance to ask some questions if you have. I know you've been very, very quiet. Which isn't uncommon, Mary, for them to be very quiet. And I say this to them every time we get together, but feel free to unmute, ask questions if you have them. And I'll pause, give you just a second to do that. Is
there a feature you wish you had that you don't currently have?
Yes, event monitoring. With a larger org, there's just so much that goes on that you can't keep track of. And I would love for us to have event monitoring, because I think it would make our lives easier from a proactive standpoint. Like, we have a whole security team that periodically runs vulnerability testing, and we have to address vulnerabilities. We could get in front of those more and more easily if we had the event monitoring access to help us with that. That's probably the biggest thing that I would want as a feature, a Salesforce feature. we're fortunate enough to have things like a backup solution, a DevOps tool, which is huge. We're fortunate to have a lot of those tools already.
Anyone else have questions?
I have, sorry, I joined the meeting a little bit late. Mary, would you mind sharing the link to your knowledge implementation?
I will try and find it and get Terry afterwards.
Okay.
It is done on, I did it on Automation Hour, and I know all the old recordings are there, so I can definitely find it. It'll take me, I don't think anyone wants to watch me Google and scroll on camera.
Okay, thank you.
Sure thing.
Yeah, we'll get that posted in the community once we have that. So cool. You also lead a group of people. You are no longer a solo admin. You've got an entire team that support you, that you lead. Tell us a little bit about them. How that transition.
There's 5, soon to be 6.
Okay.
So the transition happened kind of unexpectedly. I was starting to feel almost like I had outgrown my role again, and started to think about what came next. And I was talking to another friend about their manager, and she was venting about, like, this is how they run meetings and this is how they do stuff. And I was like, well, no, you need to do, like, these are the things you should be focusing on. And I was telling my manager, because I had such a good relationship with her, and I was like, I could do that. And she asked me flat out, she's like, have you ever thought about people leadership? And I was like, I have, but my biggest hesitation had been like getting further from the technology, and losing the day-to-day. And it turned out she was actually outgrowing her role and moved internally to oversee the tech stack that our HR department uses. And so what I didn't know at the time was she was actually looking for someone to fill that opening.
Okay.
So the timing aligned perfectly. But before I said yes, I asked a lot of people. I asked people I knew that were people leaders. I asked them what the biggest challenges were. And I got some great advice from Gordon Lee, and his was, one of the hardest things is that you have to be okay with people doing it not the way you would do it. And you have to learn when to step in. You have to learn to, if they do it and it wasn't the way you do it and it's fine and it's scalable, you let it go.
Yeah.
If there is a teachable moment, like maybe it's not built to scale, maybe there's something that runs afoul of best practices, that's where you have the conversation. And I think that, and I talked to my senior members of my team a lot about that as we brought on junior members, because they're like, I wouldn't do it like that. And I was like, okay, like, here's what you always need to be thinking about. Like, is this really your hill to die on? Is this really something you need to be talking to the group about? What I didn't expect to like so much about leadership is really getting to focus more on enterprise projects. Like, I still take a couple stories here and there, and I do work on stuff. I tend to take either take or assign out what we call our prod support. So like, maybe you need a new dashboard, or so-and-so needs a permission change. Like, I'll take a look at that, and either I'll do it or I'll dispatch it to someone on the team. So it kind of gives me a good feeling for what's going on. But, profile to permission set movement, that's something I look at. Tooling replacements, that's something I oversee. And I will bring in members of my team. And so that's been really rewarding in an unexpected way, and still keeps me close to the technology, because I do feel personally, to be a good people leader, you do have to have a good understanding of what challenges and things your people face on a day-to-day basis. My mantra as a leader has kind of been to do all the things, and you might see my cat in a second because he's about to walk past my camera. That's Mel. Is I want to be as transparent as I can be. I can't always be transparent about everything.
Right.
And I want people to feel like they know what's going on.
And Mary, I'm sorry, I need to interrupt real quick. Clarissa, I do have to run and grab somebody from the door. I've got somebody coming to the house to do some stuff. I'm going to let you kind of go through the lightning round questions that we have. Mary, continue this topic, though. I just wanted to make that transition real quick to Clarissa, and then I'll be right back. All right, thank you.
But yeah, I like to, I like to be as open as I can with my team. I like to set clear expectations and goals with the team and encourage them. I always believe that everyone should have what's called a SMART goal. So it's specific, it's measurable, it's time bound. I forget the other letter acronyms, but
achievable.
Achievable, yes.
Attainable.
Yes. Yes. And relevant. Yes. Thank you, Pearl.
There we go.
And so that's a lot of stuff I do with them. I've also tried to develop things like onboarding templates so that we're onboarding people consistently. When I joined, my whole team complained about emails, like, oh, we get so many emails. And I was like, it's not bad at all. Yeah, 6 months later, I found out I wasn't even on a distribution list that everyone else is on. And then I started getting bombarded. So my goal is to make sure like consistency in the way I manage people and the way I onboard people to make sure that we're inclusive.
Awesome.
So there's a lightning round, it sounds like.
There is a lightning round.
And I think I saw a question about what is people leader. Yes, people leader is manager.
All right. Who is your favorite Salesforce mascot and why?
Ernie, who is a lesser known mascot, mostly because the other cat, the one you didn't see, is named Ernie. So I have a soft spot for Ernie's.
Which one is Ernie? I don't think I know that
He is the badger.
Okay. I didn't realize his name was Ernie.
And I think he was named after Dominique's grandma, maybe. I think it was like she was Ernestina.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. I'm here for it. Okay, if you had to pick a song that played every time you walked into a room, what would the song be and why?
I saw that and I don't know. That was so hard to choose. There's so many songs for so many moods.
I'm gonna have
to punt on that one.
I love the question though. It's
actually no, I have one because my husband makes fun of me. The Cure has a song Close to Me. And they have two versions, and one has horns and one doesn't. And I always love the horn version. And anytime we hear the non-horn version, I say, you know what would be better? And he's like, if it was the horn version. I'm like, I know.
All right. What is your favorite Salesforce product or feature?
Ooh, Flow. I started out hating Flow, but I really love Flow. I was awful at it and really learned the hard way through lots of error and a lot of trial.
It's fun. I like Flow too. If you could change one feature in Salesforce, which one would it be and why?
Only one?
I know, right?
I guess I'd start with knowledge because I feel like that's kind of a dumpster fire. It's a bolt-on product that feels like a bolt-on product, and it would make it much. And I know they're doing work on it. They're doing stuff with unified knowledge. So I'm excited what that's going to look like. But I think that would be the one. At any time we get a story that's knowledge related, the nice thing about being a manager is I can give it to someone else because I just internally grown inside.
What is your favorite method for learning about new Salesforce features?
So it's a couple things. I'm active in Ohana Slack. I'm one of the admins, so I tend to pick up a lot of stuff from there. But we do a internal release readiness on my team 3 times a year. So we actually basically we're all responsible for the release notes. We need to read them with attention to the areas we specialize in. We record all of those findings on a document in Confluence, which is where we keep our internal knowledge. And we meet and we talk about what we're excited about, why, what we want to work on. We'll create stories if they think they're relevant. And then as the product owner, what I do is I own all the release comms. So when the release is happening, but I also work with our stakeholders and I talk about like I curate the list. So I don't tell them about all the stuff that's coming that doesn't apply to them. I post in our company Slack all the features that are going to be auto-enabled for end users, so like enhancements to reports or dashboards or things like that. And then with that smaller group of internal stakeholders, I talk about things they should be focusing on. Things like the rollout of the pronoun field. Like, here's something that like I really think that you should do or we should think about and plan for. And so that's one of the best ways that we learn. And our team doesn't just stick to the release notes. They'll look at they're also all in Ohana Slack. They'll look at blogs. They'll participate in release readiness calls, all of that kind of stuff.
Maybe we are at time. We are at 12:30. I want to be respectful of your time. I know you're busy as well. So I am so grateful for you taking the time to do this for us. I hope that the team found this helpful. I certainly found it intriguing. It was great to get to know you more as well. So thank you again for taking the time. It's absolutely wonderful.
This was fun. I was glad to join. I hope that I hope that our conversation has been helpful to you, and I will find that automation hour piece and I will share it with Terry to reshare out.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Thanks, everyone. We will see you next month.
Bye.
Bye-bye.